everybody. So you all are the faithful ones who have stuck with us in this on this journey, right, through the book of Genesis. So we have one more class after this evening, and my hope is tonight to really look at the saga of Jacob. That's really where the spotlight falls on these chapters, as you could probably tell. Did you notice how Isaac almost disappeared from the text? He is there, of course, but Abraham was a giant in the text, and Jacob certainly is, and Isaac is kind of a filler in between the two. Although there are a couple of references, I don't know if you picked up to it in the reading, about the fear of Isaac, and that made me think as a reference to God. No wonder the name Fear of Isaac got attached to his name. At least that was the Hebrew Bible translation. So our last gathering is going to be a few weeks out because of all these weird things that happen on Tuesday nights in the month of March after tonight. So April the 5th, the first Tuesday in April, is the next scheduled and the final scheduled class for the book of Genesis. So Margaret Cook has suggested that we do what we've done at some previous gatherings and perhaps gather a little early, around 6:30, if you want to bring any light refreshments and or a bottle of wine or something, then we can have a little celebration and then do our final class. So we will be covering tonight chapters 25 through 36. Hope you have the chance to read some of those stories. And for the last class, we will do 37 through 50. So that will take us through the end of the book of Genesis. But that section of Genesis, unlike everything we've seen so far, is almost like a continuous novella. It's really the story of Joseph. So, and a very beautiful literature in Genesis. So, all right, that said, shall we begin with a moment of silence, and we will pray tonight. O God, all gracious, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God of the patriarchs of our fathers and mothers, we lift our hearts to you this night and ask you to shape us in our response to you. You are the God of promises, and we entrust our world to your care tonight, especially the people of Ukraine and people everywhere who are suffering. Grant them peace, justice, and an awareness of your presence and strength, for you are God forever and ever. Amen. Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, how many had the opportunity to read through these chapters? Okay, quite a few. A lot of stuff, right? Did you notice? Wow. What struck you? Anything in particular? Or what questions did it raise?
Mary Beth turned to me after she read it and said, I don't know who the good guys are here.
Good. I don't know who the good guys are here. Okay, good. Yeah, it's true, right? There's some pretty disturbing elements. We've been talking about these disturbing narratives in Genesis. We still have them, don't we? In this section. By the way, one of the things I would highlight, if you read the text, then you are very aware that family life in biblical times was a very messy event, a very messy affair. So maybe as any of us struggle with family affairs and issues in our own families, it's good to remember that even the most blessed chosen people of God had to deal with all the issues and wrestling of family life. And their messiness might make ours look pretty clean, right? Before we jump into tonight's text, I thought just a quick reminder about Abraham. He is the first one God called. And last time I asked you to share what you thought what was his great contribution, his significance in terms of our heritage. And just a few things that struck me when thinking about Abraham. One, God called him to be a father of nations. So that sense of God's initiative. God always starts by beginning to call. And it's a reminder for us. He's the father of the three great Western religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all trace their roots back to Abraham, our father in faith. A second element about Abraham is his deep trust in God. You know, when the Lord calls him, he says yes, he obeys. The third is that whole element of blessing. You know, God says, you know, I will bless you, Abraham, and you will be a blessing. All the nations of the earth will find blessing in you. So when we look at the deepest intent of God, it's always about blessing, not only Abraham, but that all humanity would be blessed through that choice of God. And that will resonate, by the way, throughout the book of Genesis. The promise of God to Abraham, the gift of the land, how important it is to have a place, a home, and descendants, as numerous as the stars of heaven and the sands on the seashore. The gift of the promised son, Isaac, who becomes a type for Christ in the New Testament. Abraham's weaknesses are on display in the text, and that's also a good reminder for us that God chooses flawed people to do God's will. You know, as Paul puts it in the New Testament, we are earthen vessels who carry a treasure inside. Abraham's willingness to have dialogues with God and to speak honestly. And finally, Abraham's devotion to God. He builds altars wherever he goes. He calls on the name of the Lord. So he is a model of faith in that regard, not only in trusting God and following, but also of worship. All right, that said, tonight we're going to move beyond Abraham and Sarah. Isaac will appear in the story that we read last week to this week, but the real focus, the spotlight, is on Jacob and his brother Esau, and particularly Jacob. So how many of y'all, when reading the text in preparation for tonight, came away with a real warm feeling about Jacob? No, he is not at first blush a very likable character, is he, in the biblical narrative? That's why it's so funny. We say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you know. So, but God can do great things with the worst of us. We should not forget that. So, if we go to chapter 25, let's go to verse 19, and that's really where the story begins. So it's funny when they put chapter headings into Genesis 1,000 years into the Christian church, they didn't always put them in the best places. So it would have been nice to have the chapter end at the end of verse 18 and a new chapter begin there, because the story really takes the next turn right there. So this is the story of Isaac. This is the Hebrew Bible, son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he took to wife Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel the Aramean of Padan Aram, sister of Laban the Aramean. Laban, her brother, is going to, as you all know after having read the text, is going to play a prominent role as the story unfolds. Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. Remember, Sarah couldn't have a child, nor can Rebekah at the beginning. That barrenness theme will continue with Rachel. So, you know, it seems like the wives that matter have trouble having children. And that carries for us Christians to two important figures in the New Testament. Well, one important figure anyway. Elizabeth, yes. And then, of course, a virgin birth through Mary. So, and the Lord responded to his plea, and his wife Rebekah conceived. But the children struggled in her womb. And she said, "If so, why do I exist?" She went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord answered her, "Two nations are in your womb. Two separate peoples shall issue from your body. One people shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." So that is the prophecy of God. And Esau will become the father of the nation of Edom, who are the enemies of Israel. They were across the way to the east. So within the womb of the matriarch is both the people that will become the people of Israel through Jacob and also the older son Esau. Remember, in the ancient world and in biblical times this is also true, the firstborn son usually got the birthright and the blessing. They were considered most important. So, we have this paradox that God continues to choose not the one that we would expect by cultural norm. So David is the youngest of his brothers and becomes the great king of Israel and so forth. So God has this way of overturning our human expectations about things. When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first one emerged red, like a hairy mantle all over, so they named him Esau. And I think that's a Hebrew play on the word hair, or hairy. Then his brother emerged holding on to the heel of Esau. So they named him Jacob, and the word Jacob is sort of referring to somebody who is grasping. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. So the very imagery of birth, Esau comes out first, but Jacob is grabbing at his heel as if he's trying to pull him back into the womb so that Jacob can be the firstborn. That will tell you everything you need to know about the story of Jacob and Esau. Every other story that we read is right there in that verse. So, right? You pick up on that? And here we have already, right here at the very beginning, Esau sells his birthright because he's hungry. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the outdoors, but Jacob was a mild man who stayed in camp. Isaac favored Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah favored Jacob. So the oldest was the father's favorite. The younger was the mother's favorite. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the open, famished. And Esau said to Jacob, "Give me some of that red stuff to gulp down, for I'm famished." "First, sell me your birthright," Jacob said. And Esau said, "I am at the point of death, so of what use is my birthright to me?" So this, on Esau's part, is very foolish, of course. He just squanders his birthright on food. It's kind of a foreshadowing of what happens when we put our hungers of our stomach, the desires of the flesh, ahead of the spirit of God's will. So there's a moral in this story. But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Jacob then gave Esau bread and lentil stew. He ate and drank, and he rose and went away. Thus did Esau spurn the birthright. So, it's a foreshadowing of further things to come. All right, chapter 26 we've already seen before. That's the one where we play the game of My Wife is My Sister, version number 3.0, with Ahimelech. But also you do see foreshadowings of things that will come in Egypt in terms of famine and the struggles and so forth, and hostilities. Verse 24 is significant, though, in that chapter, and if I'm not mistaken, this may be the only appearance of the Lord to Isaac. So remember the times that the Lord appears in dramatic fashion to Abraham over and over again, and when you read the material for tonight, the Lord also shows up in mysterious ways with Jacob. So in verse 24, that night the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. This is to Isaac. Fear not, for I am with you, and I will bless you, and increase your offspring for the sake of my servant Abraham. So you get in a sense, the shades of the promise that God gave to Abraham are renewed to Isaac here, the continuity. So he built an altar there and invoked the Lord by name. So that's a key moment. Chapter 27, this is a very long chapter. So, and this is the one where, so what title? Give me a title for the chapter, not from your Bibles. If you had to give it a title of your own, give me a creative title for the chapter. Family Feud. Oh, I like that one. The Jewish mother? Okay. I call it the stolen blessing. That's what it's, or the deception of Rebecca and Jacob. Right? They're kind of in cahoots, aren't they? Yeah, they work together.
I thought deception wins.
Deception wins. Oh, that's interesting. All right, so it's worth getting the details because this is masterfully written. So we should read it, don't you think? So, someone want to start us off? And tell us what translation you have when you start. I've been reading from the Jewish Bible. Okay, great. Okay, so the deception. What did you notice about the story? What struck you? How likable is Rebecca in the story?
It's cunning.
Cunning, yes, very cunning. He fell for her at the well, didn't he? Or for the servants. Thought she was beautiful. Oh, this would be a beautiful wife. Very cunning.
Maybe she was more discerning because she knew her son Esau was a
Mm.
sportsman and he had sold his birthright
Ah,
and was not the one to continue the family.
ah.
Maybe there was a
Maybe she was more discerning.
more discerning.
Which son is going to do a better job at this? Interesting, yeah.
But also the birth where she was praying when they were struggling in the womb, maybe she was thinking of that.
Thinking about that moment when they're struggling in the womb, yes. And the Lord's promise. Although she doesn't really allude to that, does she? She doesn't say, well, the Lord said, dot, dot, dot. It's almost like that prophecy was was after the story, right? As an introductory, explanatory episode to explain all this. The other thing too, the implication, of course, is that Isaac is blind. He can't see very well anymore. So he has to rely on his other senses. But do you get this sense that Isaac is not convinced, that he's troubled? Something is amiss here. Which one are you? Let me, you don't sound like my son Esau. Let me touch you, you know. And someone said they put the game skin on his hands and so forth on his neck. How much hair did he have on his hands and neck, you know? And then, you know, he smells, and someone made the point, you know, for a person that's nearly blind, shouldn't you put more trust in your other senses, in your sense of hearing? Trust that it sounds like Jacob and not Esau. So in a sense, he kind of talked himself out of what he knew in his heart was true, which is this is not Esau.
I was wondering if his senses were also dulled in his older age because, you know, if you have kid skin and, you know, it's not going to feel very, and in the smell, you know, even though he has his clothes on, it might still smell a little off.
Yeah, it smelled like his son because he had on Esau's clothing. Yeah.
Isaac said, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" He answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." That was kind of puzzling to me. I mean,
Yeah, he's cunning about it, but in fact, there's a truth to it that God will bless him, right?
right. So it's kind
Right? It is a paradoxical, but God will kind of make true, actually. Yeah, good observation. Also, in Hebrew, there is a play on words with birthright and blessing. So, birthright is Bekora, blessing is Barakah. So, the same three consonants are in both words. So, it's just a shift in vowels between Bekora and Barakah. So, birthright and blessing connected together. You sold your birthright, now you would lose your blessing. And the brothers are going to bow down to you. And Israel will rejoice that Edom will bow down to them in the future. So by the time they've written the story, they know the outcome, right? They know what happened with the Edomites. The Moabites are also, as we said last time, Israel's other enemy to the east. And when I went to the Holy Land the first time, our tour guide was a native Arab Christian, and he said, you know, I am from the biblical land of Moab. And I said, oh, Moab, like, and the psalm it says, Moab I will use for my washbowl. And he was like, he just looked at me kind of confused. Because, you know, it's so funny that he, as a Christian, didn't know that being proud of being from Moab is probably not a biblical reflection, you know, so it's kind of funny. All right, let's continue. Someone want to do another translation? What do we have? Another translation available with verse 30? We'll go forward. Mary.
of American Bible.
Okay, which is our liturgical text. That's good.
Verse 30. Jacob had Esau exclaimed, "He has been well named Jacob. He has now supplanted me twice. First he took away my birthright, and now he has taken away my blessing." Then he pleaded, "Haven't you saved a blessing for me?" Isaac replied, "I have already appointed him your master, and I have assigned him all his kinsmen as his slaves. Besides, I have enriched him with grain and wine. What then can I do for you, son?" But Esau urged his father, "Have you only that one blessing, father? Bless me too." Isaac, however, made no reply, and Esau wept aloud. Finally Isaac spoke again and said to him, "Ah, far from the fertile earth shall be your dwelling, far from the dew of the heavens above. By your sword you shall live, and your brother you shall serve. But when you become restive, you shall throw off his yoke from your neck." Esau bore Jacob a grudge because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, "When the time of mourning for my father comes, I will kill my brother Jacob." When Rebekah got news of what her older son Esau had in mind, she called her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Listen, your brother Esau intends to settle accounts with you by killing you. Therefore, son, do what I tell you. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran, and stay with him a while until your brother's fury subsides, until your brother's anger against you subsides, and he forgets what you did to him. Then I will send for you and bring you back. Must I lose both of you in a single day?"
We'll pause there. So, yeah, it's interesting. The story it's a very moving story, isn't it? And one of the things that you get a sense of, which I think is also quite beautiful, is that sons need the blessing of their father. And if you don't get a blessing from your father, it doesn't go very well for you. And so he is begging his father for a blessing. Even though you gave away the blessing to the younger son, can you not still bless me? The blessing he gives him doesn't sound very good, though, does it? It's kind of like, well, yeah, you're going to be far from the fertile earth and the dew of heaven. You're going to be living by your sword, which means not a lot of peace in your life. You're going to serve your brother, but there is an element to it. It's like God hearing Ishmael. But when you grow restive, you shall break his yoke from your neck. So you're not going to be enchained to him forever. So this translation, by the way, in verse 42, I love the way this translation puts it. It says, when the words of her elder son Esau were reported to Rebekah, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Your brother Esau is consoling himself by planning to kill you." It's like, yeah, it's a beautiful way of putting it. You just wait. When the time of mourning is over, I'm going to kill you, brother. So, do you blame him?
I'm just getting the sense that what we consider blessings now is not what they were considering a blessing. Like, a parent can bless 13 children if that's what they have.
Right.
And so what
This is
something here
the blessing.
the blessing,
Yeah.
Meaning
That he gets the inheritance. He is the one who will become Lord over his brothers in the end.
so somebody has to be it?
Yeah, he will be the one. Normally the oldest son is, in the patriarchal cultures. So
But
it's been turned upside down.
I can kind of understand the whole birthright thing back there, but for goodness sakes, they're twins. What was there, 5-minute difference in their births? All of a
Right.
sudden there's this big birthright, and and he gave it away. He sells his birthright.
Yeah, it does.
He's 5 minutes older.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's something powerful about the sense that once that blessing is given, he can't take it back. There's no switching it. You can't give a parallel blessing of equal value. Okay, I'll give you a lesser blessing, but no, he got the big deal. Jacob did. So now let me also add this. If you read the whole rest of the story, Jacob pays for his deception, doesn't he? For a long time to come.
20 years.
There are consequences for everything we do, right? And 20 years. He is away from his brother Esau for 20 long years. And Esau has not forgotten, and Jacob has also not forgotten what he did to his brother either. So when he tries to make the return, he is afraid to come home. So You know, and there is a sense, and the other thing too, remember Rebecca saying, don't worry about a curse, you'll be blessed, let the curse fall on me. And one commentator observed that, you know, once Jacob leaves, he never sees Rebecca again. So she dies before he returns. So there is a certain sadness. I mean, he was close to his mother, but as a result of what they did, he will never see her again. So there is a sense in which her favorite son will no longer be in her presence either. You know, so there's he is, in fact, he's sort of a little bit, for about 20 years, he's sort of like Cain, who becomes the wanderer. He can't be at home anymore. He's in exile. And, but Esau has also elements of Cain, that resentment, that crestfallenness, I'm going to kill my brother. That's the same spirit that Cain nourished when he killed his brother Abel. So there's a darkness in Esau about this. We would probably understand why that darkness is there, but nonetheless, it's a darkness that would lead to, if he killed his brother, would lead to his own grave situation. So it's probably good that Jacob headed out of town. Let's just put it that way. So it's interesting, you know, there, as I mentioned to you all before, the book as we have it today is probably a blend of older sources, older stories, and this story is a very profound story, maybe from the Yahwist, the one who has that more earthy approach to things. The next little section here has a different reason that Jacob will leave that almost doesn't necessarily have to depend upon deception. It's more like when Isaac had to go to find a wife. You know, Jacob, we don't want you marrying the local people here. You know, you go back home and find a wife. So there's a more neutral explanation that we shift to at this point. Rebecca said to Isaac, I'm disgusted with my life because of the Hittite women, these women around us, you know how they are. So if Jacob marries a Hittite woman like these from among the native women, what good will life be to me? So Isaac sent for Jacob and blessed him. So you get a sense, oh, this is when the blessing takes place. None of that other story behind it. He instructed him, saying, you shall not take a wife from among the Canaanite women. Up, go to Padan Aram to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take a wife there from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. So this is almost like a parallel narrative giving another reason why Jacob would leave to go back to the hometown, not because he's trying to get away. So, and may El Shaddai, which is the God of the patriarchs, bless you, make you fertile and numerous so that you become an assembly of peoples. It's like handing on the blessing of God. May he grant the blessing of Abraham to you and your offspring, that you may possess the land where you are sojourning, which God assigned to Abraham. That sounds a little bit more like the priestly source and less like the Yahwist. Now, I will also add, though, that Laban, we're going to get to know a little bit. Uncle Laban will be an interesting sort of an uncle himself. When Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him off to Padan Aram to take a wife there, so you don't have a sense that the whole narrative happened, charging him as he blessed him, you shall not take a wife from among the Canaanite women, and that Jacob had obeyed his father and mother and gone to Padan Aram, Esau realized that the Canaanite women displeased his father Isaac. Remember, Esau had married 2 of them. So Esau went to Ishmael and took to wife, in addition to the wives that he had, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, son of Abraham, the sister of Nebaioth. So that would be Esau's 3rd wife. So they had plenty of wives in those days, didn't they? And if the wives didn't work out, they also got the maidservants. So
I'm not sure that wasn't the wives being happier not to have Dylan. Just one of those guys.
you're not sure what?
I'm serious. I mean, I think the women, they had so much work and everything. They were probably happy to have some sisters, sister wives at that time. Because they got nothing good. And, they were expected to do so much. And then, God forbid, you're infertile and they want to kill you, I mean, would that be part that you needed a community to raise that kind of a house?
Yeah, it's interesting. I suspect that in the ancient world, having lots of progeny was very important to grow your family. and spread throughout the land. So if you had multiple wives and you fathered many children, you could be more fertile. All right, so that the first commandment of God to Adam was be fertile, be fruitful, fill the earth, multiply and fill the earth, you know. So there is that sense of that. Now, but in chapter 28, we also run into the first very important encounter that Jacob will have with the living God. So this is one of the accounts from Scripture that comes up in our lectionary, and it's a profound text. So we're going to take a look into this story here in chapter 28, verse 10. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night. Remember, Abraham also had a vision of God in the night, where God, the symbols of God, go between cut up animals on either side in the night. A terrifying trance took over Abraham that night. For the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of that place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. He had a dream, a stairway. Some translate a ramp, or a ladder. A stairway was set on the ground, and its top reached to the sky, or the heavens. And angels of God were going up and down on it, ascending and descending. And the Lord was standing beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. The ground on which you are lying I will assign to you and to your offspring. Your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and the south. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and your descendants. Remember, I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I've promised you. Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is present in this place, and I did not know it. Shaken, he said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the abode of God, and that is the gateway to heaven. Early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. He named that site Bethel, which means house of God, by the way. But previously, the name of the city had been Luz. Jacob then made a vow, saying, If God remains with me, if he protects me on this journey that I'm making, and gives me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and if I return safe to my father's house, the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up as a pillar shall be God's abode, and of all that you give me, I will set aside a tithe for you. So it's a place of holy encounter with the mystery of God. This ladder or stairway that connects earth and heaven, with God's angels going up and down the ladder, are a symbol of communion between heaven and earth in this location. And it's God's way in this moment of renewing the promise he made to Abraham and to Isaac, and now handing that promise on to Jacob. So a very significant moment in that, with that holy encounter with God there. So very significant text. Now, questions about that or observations before we go forward in the story?
The land where he's lying is between Isaac and Laban. He's on the journey to Laban. He hasn't gotten there yet. So the Lord has given him this land where this stone is, Bethel.
And I think Bethel is, so Bethel is still in Israel. So it's Bethel or Luz is it's north of Jerusalem, south of Shechem. So between the Sea of Salt and the Sea of Galilee, on top of the mountains. So he's heading from Bethlehem or south Beersheba and so forth, northward toward Haran, which is much further to the north beyond Damascus. So he has quite a lot of journey to go. He's just started the journey. All right, chapter 29 and 30, our next two chapters. Boy, those are very interesting chapters if you read them. So what happens is he shows up at a well. Does that make you think of anything? And there he sees a beautiful, beautiful woman by the name of Rachel. And we'd say he falls head over heels over her. So, it's, again, future weddings take place at wells, and this is a second major moment when we've seen the setting of the well, just like Isaac. The servants found Isaac, Rebekah at the well. So now, turns out that Rachel is the daughter of his uncle Laban. So Laban is so happy to see his nephew. And that's the way the text seems to read. And then he says, basically, I'm going to condense the story down. This is the Reader's Digest version. He says, I would love to marry Rachel. Okay, that's wonderful. Let's do that. Just give me 7 years of labor. And Rachel, by the way, happened to have a sister, Leah, who wasn't quite so attractive. And he didn't really, she was okay, but, So after 7 years, he says, okay, I'll keep my bargain. You got Leah. He goes, no, wait a minute. I worked for 7 years for Rachel, not Leah. He goes, no, it's Leah. He goes, if you want Rachel, it's 7 more years. So 7 more years of work for his uncle Laban. He finally gets Rachel, and then he has to work, another 6 years, so he can get the herds and the livestock and all that he needs to take back home with him. So he ends up being in service to his uncle for 20 years. So it is interesting, though, because when you read through the narrative, it's going to tell us all about how many sons does Jacob have in the end? 12, very important symbolically. Any daughters? 1, Dinah, right? Have you noticed that usually they don't tell us about the daughters?
There could be more.
Unless something is going to happen later to that daughter. So, yeah, that's part of the story. All right, so we get, who is childless? Rachel is childless. The one he loves the most can't have children, just like Sarah couldn't have children. So it's Leah who starts having children. So Reuben, the firstborn, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. So these 12 sons will become the 12 tribes of Israel. So very important for the history. So because Jacob's name will be changed to Israel, and he will be a symbol of the whole people of God. And the 12 sons represent the 12 tribes. So right now he's still called Jacob, but he's going to get the name of Israel. And then finally, then Leah stops being able to have children, right? So she gives her maidservant as a wife. And 2 more boys show up, Dan and Naphtali. And then Rachel decides that perhaps she needs to give her maidservant to have children that way, since she can't herself. So that's where Gad and Asher come from. And then we get, Leah that becomes fertile again, and we get Issachar and Zebulun and Dinah the daughter. But finally, Rachel, her barrenness ends, and Joseph comes along. He's going to be very symbolic. So for the rest of Genesis, Joseph plays a key part. So Rachel is the one he loves. Joseph is in a sense, the particularly favorite son in the end. And so he's the one born of Rachel. And then later on, you hear that Rachel in childbirth dies, but she will give birth to their final son, Benjamin. So he will make the 12th son. And those are the 12 tribes of Israel. So the interesting thing is, so Jacob is been tricked by his father-in-law to 20 years worth of labor. And at the very end, basically, he's ready to go home. He wants to go back to his father, Isaac. And Laban says, okay, well, if you want to take any herds and livestock with you, you can, pick the best, whatever. And Laban says, not Laban, Jacob says, well, not really, I don't really need them. Oh, no, I insist, you've worked all these years, you should take something with you. So he kind of picks the ones that are kind of marked and spotted and speckled and all that. He goes, well, I'll just take the ones that are speckled and spotted and all that. So, and Laban is a kind of he's a self-centered deceiver, and he says, okay, that's fine, that's the deal. So before the time comes for them to split company, he gets all the speckled animals and removes them from the flock. So when it's time for Jacob to leave, there are no speckled animals left. So Jacob sees what's happened, and he works out a clever plot to use rods that were believed to cause the animals to be born with speckles, so that all the newborn animals suddenly are born with speckles and spots. And suddenly he has a whole bunch of very healthy herd that are all speckled and spotted. And he goes, oh, I'll take these as we agreed. So the interesting thing is that his deceiving uncle Laban is out-deceived by Jacob. So then Jacob decides it's time to head off and get away. So in chapter 31, he decides to head on his way. Now there's one other kind of funny element about the story. On their way out, did anybody notice what Rachel happened to pick up as they were rushing away?
Household gods.
She stole her father's household. The narrator actually in the Hebrew text calls them household idols, but Laban calls them his gods. So he was obviously not a worshiper of the Lord God. So she grabbed the idols. And he discovers, by the way, later that they're missing, and comes looking for them and accuses Jacob of having stolen his household gods. And Jacob doesn't know anything about it. And he says, I have not stolen any of your household gods. If you want to look around, please look around. And he starts searching all the tents to see if they're hidden away in the tents. Do you remember where Rachel had hidden them? Yeah, she stuffed them into the cushion on her camel, and because she's sitting on top of them. And she said, well, pardon me, Dad, I can't get off my camel because I'm in my womanly period, and I'm just not able to get up right now. So it would have defiled the household gods, but he just knows nothing about it. So he is successfully plundered not only by his son but also by his
Nothing scares a man.
daughter. Now, let's go to chapter 32. And I think verse 10 is, chapter 32 is a beautiful chapter, by the way. So, and what's beautiful about it is that, Jacob is going to go home, and he's got to work things out with Esau, his brother. And so, he cheated him, he stole the birthright, he stole the blessing, he ran away, and it's unresolved. So how many conflicts in families remain unresolved for years on end? This is a biblical prototype of that. So unhealed family ruptures, but I think a very significant moment. Verse 8, Jacob was greatly frightened. In his anxiety, he divided the people with him and the flocks and herds and camels into two camps. So what was his plan? Well, if there are two separate camps and Esau had 400 men, that's a lot of men. When he attacks one side, then the other side can run away and be protected. So he kind of split his group in half. But then verse 10, this is what I think is significant. Then Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your native land, and I will deal bountifully with you. I am unworthy of all the kindness that you've steadfastly shown your servant. With my staff alone I crossed this Jordan, and now I've become two camps. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. Else I fear he may come and strike me down, mothers and children alike. Yet you have said, I will deal bountifully with you and make your offspring as the sands of the sea, which are too numerous to count. So I think that that's a key turning point in the narrative. Why? It's the first time in his life that Jacob seems to own what he has done. And so saying, I'm unworthy of the kindness that you've shown me. It's like you have this glimmer in Jacob of conscience, his first recognition. I really didn't treat my brother rightly. That was wrong. And I believe that will open the pathway for the next sacred encounter he will have with God. So, but Jacob is still smart. He has a plan. So he sends lots of servants ahead of him with many, many gifts for his brother, so that all will go well, hopefully. And but that night he will have a second vision. So verse 23, this is a very important nighttime encounter with the mystery of God again. So let's start at verse 23. Someone want to read that for us and just mention your translation again. Chapter 32, verse 23. Okay.
In the course of that night, however, Jacob arose, took his 2 wives, 2 maidservants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had taken them across the stream and had brought over all his possessions, Jacob was left there alone. Then some man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When the man saw that he could not prevail over him, he struck Jacob's hip at its socket, so that the hip socket was wrenched as they wrestled. The man then said, Let go, for it is daybreak. Let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob said, I will not let you go until you bless me. What is your name? The man asked. He answered, Jacob. Then the man said, You shall no longer be spoken of as Jacob, but as Israel, because you have contended with the one who has prevailed. Jacob then asked him, Do tell me your name, please. He answered, Why should you want to know my name? With that he bade him farewell. Jacob named the place Peniel, because I have seen God face to face, he said, yet my life has been spared. At sunrise, as he left Peniel, Jacob limped along because of his hip. That is why to this day the Israelites should not eat the sciatic muscle that is on the hip socket, inasmuch as Jacob's hip socket was struck at the sciatic muscle.
Okay, so a powerful encounter with the mystery of God. So that initial opening of Jacob, of sorrow, repentance, I would say, his awareness of unworthiness and humbly asking God for help. So God, what happens is he wrestles with God all night long. And sometimes when we've done the wrong thing and we've started the repentance process, there is a wrestling involved. But at the end of the wrestling, he realizes he has seen the face of God. That's what Penuel means. And but that encounter with the holy mystery of God will leave him forever marked. He will carry the reminder of that struggle in his body for the rest of his life. So he'll limp along. So there's something quite profound. And it's only at that moment that he gets the new name. No longer Jacob, now Israel. So that's where God claims him. So that which, you could say that which Jacob deceptively took from his father is now given by God in a beautiful way. So, And in the next chapter, in chapter 33, there is a reconciliation with his brother, which is quite beautiful, and it prepares us for a later reconciliation that we will see in the book of Genesis. If you look at verse 3, Jacob himself went on ahead and bowed low to the ground 7 times until he was near his brother. Esau ran to greet him. Reminds us a little bit of the father and the prodigal son, running out to greet his son. He embraced him and falling on his neck, kissed him, and they wept. So there's something beautiful, the embrace, the running to him, the weeping. It is a true moment of reconciliation. So now, things don't go perfectly, and eventually Esau's going to have to head off to his own country and establish himself in Edom, but you have this beautiful moment of reconciliation. Now, we'll also add chapter 34 leads us to one of those other texts of terror that we've been running into. Dinah, which is the sole daughter of Jacob, is raped by the local inhabitants. And then they want to take, then he wants to take her for his wife. And, Jacob would probably have said, let's move on from here, but 2 of his sons decide to take matters in their own hands. So Simeon and Levi, they come up with this plan. And their plan is, we are circumcised, we men of Israel. It's the mark of the covenant, And so our sister can't be married to anybody that's not circumcised. So these are all adult men, the local inhabitants. So, if you really want to marry her, then all of you adult men are going to have to be circumcised. And so he really wants her badly enough, he says, okay. So he and all of his men get circumcised. And while they're in severe pain from the circumcision, 3 days later, the 2 sons, Simeon and Levi, kill them. So, it's you have to recognize that Israel, with their enemies, does have a certain level of humor, right? Right? So, we'll show you who violate our women what we do to you. You end up dead. So, not so good necessarily. Revenge is never good, right? So there's a shadow cast over Simeon and Levi. Chapter 35, they go again to Bethel, and there we also have another naming of Jacob as Israel. It may be another source again. In verse 9, God appeared again to Jacob on his arrival from Paddan Aram and blessed him. God said to him, you whose name is Jacob, you shall be called Jacob no more, but Israel shall be your name. Then he named him Israel, and God said to him, I am El Shaddai, God Almighty, the God of the mountain. Be fertile and increase. A nation, yes, an assembly of nations shall descend from you. Kings shall issue from your loins. The land that I assigned to Abraham and Isaac, I assign to you. And to your offspring to come will I assign the land. So this sounds like the priestly source. It's the giving of the change of name and the giving of the blessing of land and also of offspring. Gets handed on down. And we also here in this chapter have narrated the birth of his last son, Benjamin, and that's the point at which Rachel will die. Then we have the death and burial of Isaac, who lived to be 180. And then we find out that Reuben, the oldest son, basically takes Jacob's first concubine, Bilhah, is it, or the second? And basically has intercourse with her. So he takes his father's wife. So this would be a profound violation against your father. So we hear the human side of the story, that the eldest son betrays his father in a pretty abhorrent way. Chapter 36 gives us the line of Esau, which is going to be Edom. And it's interesting, you get the sense that, you know, when I mentioned before, like when we tell stories, if I were telling a story about Middle Tennessee, I'll say, well, you know, they lived down off Shoal Creek in Lawrenceburg and near that mill down there, and one of them moved out there on Weekly Creek Road and bought that farm out there that the Burlines live in now, you know, where the Burlines live. The Rollings are out that way too. It's almost, you get this rambling sense of, it really gives you, Israel's giving you the whole history of their neighbors, Edom, and all the different clans, and you even get somebody, and you know, you get the sense that they're telling a story that everybody hears, has already heard of. They know the backdrops, but they don't always tell us in the Bible the whole backstory. For example, in verse 24, the sons of Zibeon were these, Ahiah and Anah. That was the Anah who discovered the hot springs in the wilderness. Remember him? While pasturing the asses of his father Zibeon? Well, we don't know about that. It's just, but they presume that the hearer knows the story. You know, that one who got those hot springs out there. So it's kind of an interesting narrative. And then in chapter 37, we're going to come to Jacob settled in the land where his father had sojourned, the land of Canaan. This then is the line of Jacob. So now we're going to hear the descendants of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended the flocks with his brothers. So now we're going to start hearing all about Jacob, or Israel's favorite son, which is Joseph. So here begins the narrative about Joseph in chapter 37. That's why we decided to break there this evening. All right, questions?
But Joseph wasn't the oldest son in terms of getting the birthright.
Not the oldest son, but he will play a pivotal role in the narrative going forward. He's the one that gets them all down to Egypt, which is where they'll be ultimately blessed, then ultimately enslaved, then ultimately liberated by God, 400 years later or whatever.
There's a number of places where we talk about orange oil, right?
Yes.
What is the significance?
All right, so sacred pillars would be sacred places like altars, like terebinths. So in the early history of Israel, sacred places were marked with sacred stones, sacred trees, or an altar that had been built. So the stone is sort of a symbol of a place where a sacred encounter with God happened. And oil was used for Israel to set things apart for sacred purposes. So to pour oil on them, to pour oil on a man, meant that God had set him apart to be king, for example. So to anoint that stone meant this is no ordinary pillar of rock. This has been set aside to remind us of this sacred place where God was encountered. So in the time of the ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, sacred places were important. Bethel, Beersheba, and many places that become very important in the religious imagination of Israel. Any other questions or observations from the text tonight? Yeah.
I was stuck with the, excuse my voice, in chapter 35, and I know these are pieces that are coming in from different sources that Yahweh gave us, that he says in the blessing in verse 11, God also, I am God for my people forever, nation indeed an assembly of nations shall stand for you, and kings shall issue from your loins.
Mm.
And yet, when you get to chapter 6, the people are asking for a king, they're denying the kingship of God.
Right.
They want to be like other nations, and yet here is this promise.
This prefiguration of kings to come, yes. Yeah, they're pointing forward to the Davidic line. And remember, the book of Genesis was put together, the priestly author is probably our last editor who had a hand in finalizing this text. So it's long after the Davidic line has come.
It's a prefigure.
Yep. You always have in the biblical text these quote-unquote foreshadowings, because the stories are being told after the fact too, so they know how it all comes about at the end. Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question, Mary. Any connection between this ladder and the book of Revelation? The most important connection, which I forgot to mention, it was on the edge of my brain and I moved past it. The key connection for us Christians is in the New Testament, in John's Gospel, where Jesus refers to Nicodemus, who would be the teacher of Israel. He says, referring to the ladder of Jacob, he says, and Jacob would know right away when he's talking about the ladder with the angels of God going up and down it, he said, you will see the Son of Man with angels ascending and descending. So what Jesus is self-identifying himself is, he is the link between heaven and earth. He is the gateway to
I'm
heaven.
starting to think like, oh,
Yeah.
a long way out there now.
Yeah, that's precisely it. So
Okay.
Jesus himself references in John's Gospel that very holy encounter with Jacob to say that I am the ladder between heaven and earth. I'm the link between heaven and earth.
Thank you.
Good question. That's why these questions are helpful on observations. All right, I do have some reflection questions for tonight in small groups, so for anybody who wants to stay in a small group tonight. And remember to finish Genesis before April 5th for our last gathering of the semester, to finish the book of Genesis. And come early if you can, 6:30, bring some refreshments, wine or other beverages, and we'll have a look. I think that's after, is that after Easter or before? Before. So we'll have a little preview of Easter to come, right? So